The great adventure into the world of social enterprise continues, and we're going to hand over the second part of this event to Philip Izard from Quality Matters, and Philip's going to introduce us to the speakers and take it from here.
Thanks, Francis. Good morning again. Thank you everyone for hanging on, and you're very, very welcome. As part of today's launch of the Social Enterprise Policy Bank, we wanted it to be an opportunity for us to also showcase some really interesting work that's happening outside of our respective counties, as well as to hear about some innovation and innovative work that's happening within the social enterprise sector. So we're delighted to kind of welcome our three guests. So we have Emma Murtagh, who's here from the Wheel, who will be our first speaker. We also have Dr. Oliver Moore, chairperson for Clough-Jordan Community Farm. We have Anna Cunningham, the manager for Leitrim Design House. Welcome, Emma. And Michael Ward, the manager for the Mullingar Employment Action Group. So we'll be hearing from each of our speakers this morning. And we thank Julie for putting together our panel for this morning as well. We feel everybody's going to be really interested in what they have to say. And I know that I'm delighted to hear what they have to say as well. After we have an opportunity to hear them speak, we're going to actually just kind of open it up and kind of make it an informal Q&A so that people who do have questions, you're more than welcome to ask them. If people do have questions about the Social Enterprise Policy Bank as well, it would be an appropriate time as well to ask questions. And I'm more than happy to answer that. I'll also have backup in Julie Clark, Orla Drew, and Megan McCabe as well to answer any questions that may be very specific to your own organisation that you've been looking for some guidance on. But yes, so before we have Emma come up to be our first speaker, I just want to briefly introduce her if that's all right. So Emma is the Europeans Programmes Manager with The Wheel, which is Ireland's national network for not-for-profit, community and voluntary and social enterprise organisations. Emma's a very busy job. She helps support community volunteer organisations across the country with not only accessing European funding, but being more aware of what funds are available, the criteria, and to understand how organisations can apply. And if they're lucky enough to get that funding, it's supporting them with the ongoing requirements around that funding. So today, Emma's here to talk about one of the particular European programs. It's called Access Europe. It's a support and capacity building fund for Irish civil society organisations in order to help them better access those EU programs that exist. The Access Europe initiative is funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and delivered in partnership with The Wheel. Emma's here to provide us with a bit of an overview of what key European funding does exist for social enterprises, what they can access, and we'll explore some of the various different EU-funded projects that are currently being funded here in Ireland. So welcome, Emma. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll test out my clicker. Oh, it does work. Excellent. Thank you very much, Phil, for that, for a lovely introduction. I think you've kind of covered the first couple of slides of my presentation here. But yeah, what I'm going to try and cover here is a little bit of information about European programs. I'm kind of assuming that a lot of you are completely new to European funding. So I'm going to kind of start from a complete beginner, kind of just an overview of what is European funding, how does it work, what are some of the kind of core characteristics, and then what kind of supports and programs are available. So to jump in, as Philip said, my name is Emma. I'm European Programs Manager at The Wheel, so you can feel free to link in with me there. And as I said, we're looking at how does EU funding work, an overview of some of the key European programs that I think would be specifically interesting to social enterprises, the pathways to either get started or scale up your European funding, depending on where you are currently in your journey, and then the supports available, including Access Europe. And then we'll, as Philip said, we'll save questions for the whole group at the end. So just looking briefly, like usually I do a whole session on how does European funding work. So I'm trying to kind of put it into 3 slides here. But just, I suppose, key insights or key kind of information that you need in order to kind of inform your decision of whether you want to go down the EU funding route is just to kind of understand where do these programs come from and what is it all about and why are these European programs available. So funding programs in Europe are thematic. So they're sorted under things like education, environment, interregional. It's not the most intuitive of systems to navigate. Anybody who's had the pleasure of reading any kind of EU websites will know that it's not. Does anybody, just actually show of hands, who has been involved in European funding before? Couple. Okay, we've got a little bit, and obviously the people on the panel as well. So yeah, you'll know anyway that it's not the most intuitive programs. I'd often have people come to me and say, I'm a homelessness organisation, what's the fund for the homelessness organisations? And I have to say that's not how it works. It's about what your project is and what your project wants to do. So regardless of what type of organisation you are, if your project is about education, you apply to the education fund. And about, a good portion of my day is explaining to organisations that you don't have to be an education organisation, you don't have to be an ETB or university or something like that to apply for it. It's about where your project fits in terms of theme. So funding programs are thematic. They're separated by what your project is about, not what your organisation is about. And they're often referred to as financial instruments to put policy into action. So essentially the way it works in Europe is that Europe comes out with a policy. So for example, the European Green Deal, which most of us would have heard of. The programs, the funding programs are there to deliver on the policy. So policy comes first, then the funding program is there to deliver the policy on the ground in various member states. So the programs fund projects, and then the results of those projects make an impact on the ground, but then also feed into future policy. So it's this kind of cycle of the policy, the programs, and the projects. So I think sometimes that helps to understand, because if you are getting into programs, it's important to know, and if you ever do apply for funding, it's important to know that it's always linked to policy, and that's what you want to be relating your project back to. And just to explain, I suppose, where it comes from. So it runs, the way European funding works is that you have a 7-year budget period, which they, rather than just calling it a budget, they call it a multi-annual financial framework, which is very typically European as well. If they can get more syllables in there, they will. So you have their MFFs, it runs in 7-year cycles. So we're currently in the 2021 to 2027 cycle. So it's actually a really good time to get involved, because the research you do, the capacity building that you do now will stand to you for a few years before you have to navigate a change in budget, which, it's not that all of your research will be wasted then. It's just that it's easier to kind of navigate a change of program when, you've had a couple of years under your belt of getting used to this kind of European landscape. So it releases its programs every 7 years. And what we saw this time round is actually a significant kind of delay with programs to do with COVID and Brexit, and just generally the change of MFF tends to take some time. So what we're seeing is that many programs are only just starting to have calls now. I'm sure loads of people in Monaghan will be familiar with the Peace programme. So I think we might see one deadline before Christmas for that, but it'll be next year, and that's that was supposed to be out in 2021. So this is the time where more and more programs are starting to release deadlines and things like that. So they release their program at the beginning of the MFF, or they're supposed to anyway. But then they also have annual work programs that are issued that allow them to kind of tailor the program to whatever's happening in the world at that moment. Obviously, when the kind of refugee crisis was at its head, a lot of the programs kind of maneuvered that way. Once COVID happens, a lot of the programs kind of maneuvered that way. So it allows them to be flexible within that 7-year period. So just if you are kind of thinking about applying for projects, just to be aware that these programs don't come out of thin air. They're all firmly rooted in policy. And if you're going to apply, always link your project back to EU policy. What EU funding is and what EU funding isn't are my next 2 slides. So I find that a little bit of kind of myth busting / expectation setting is usually necessary. So what EU funding is, it's an opportunity to learn and to share. Most EU funding, not all, but most of it does require some kind of partnership. And even more of it will require some kind of transnational partnership. So it's important, that is, there is exceptions to that. There's opportunities to do projects that are solely kind of nationally funded. But in general, if you're getting into EU funding, it's important to be open to the idea of partnership. It's an opportunity to connect with and influence policy. When we looked at the cycle there, the projects and the research that's done through projects and the information that's collected goes on to feed into future policy. And there's many projects that are specifically there to produce policy papers and research and things like that. It's an opportunity to be innovative. Now, this also means that by and large, EU funding is not keeping the lights on and the doors open. These are innovation-based projects. These are the ideas you create something new that wouldn't exist otherwise unless you had this project. So it's important to look at the kind of innovation and to ask yourself that question of, is my project innovative? Is it building something new? It's an opportunity to fast track specific strategic objectives. So that's kind of tied to being innovative. So yeah, it's not going to kind of fund business as usual. And if you're in a space where you're barely keeping the lights on, maybe EU funding isn't the right one for you. But if you're in a secure enough space and you're ready to maybe upskill or to kind of, you have a strategic objective that's been on your agenda for a long time and you've never been able to do it, EU funding can be the injection of funding that you need to get a strategic objective across the line. As I said, it's an opportunity to collaborate with partners. It is important to be open to that if you're and getting involved in EU funding, and to see it as, sometimes I talk to people and they kind of see partnership as this annoying box that they have to tick in order to get the funding, and that's not the case at all. Collaborating with partners, and I'm sure all the people on the panel here will talk about it, that it can bring enormous value to your project, and it can bring in new skills and expertise that you just don't have in-house. So it's important to treat it as an opportunity and not as a kind of limitation. And it's also, of course, an opportunity to build capacity and organisational profile. I talk to people about EU funding all day, and I don't shy away from the fact that it is challenging. The applications are challenging. Managing a project for the first time is challenging. Now, there's loads of support there, and we'll go through that later. But, it is... What I usually say to people is, if you can do EU funding, the national funding kind of seems like a piece of cake after a while. So it really forces you to be very organised and structured in how you apply for funding, in how you manage projects. And that kind of translates across the board. It really can help to professionalise organisations, to really build their kind of confidence. And of course, organisational profile, collaborating on an international level does bring an extra sense of kind of weight to your work and kind of an extra kind of vigour to the project. So that's what it is. Now what it's not. So this is the other bit. So again, I've kind of covered a lot of these. It's not quick. I sometimes get calls from people saying, we have an event in 3 months. Is there any chance of getting a bit of EU funding for it? No, is the answer. It's a journey. It's an investment into your organisation's future, into your organisation's future, and into your long-term kind of funding, diversification, and stability. It's important to see it like that. It's not a quick fix. This is something where you decide to do it, and it might take you a year or even 2 years to kind of gather your partnership, to flesh out your idea, and then to find the right funding opportunity. Now, that's not to say that you can't throw together an application pretty quickly, but often then I'd kind of warn people against that, because it can end up then being a negative experience. And we at Access Europe want people to have a positive experience with EU funding. It's not easy, as I said. I don't want to freak people out. I mean, it's doable. I do it all the time, but it's not, I wouldn't be getting into it kind of loosely and thinking, I can throw together an application in a couple of days. It is a kind of challenging landscape. But once you conquer it, and I think there's people on the panel that will say there that, it's potentially a multi-annual source of continuous funding that you can apply for year on year. So it's a worthwhile investment. It's not without risk, so projects are risky. That's why they're called projects and not operational work. There's a reason that we engage in calculated risk as an organisation, because it can lead to growth and development. But so there's lots of things you can do to mitigate the risk. And again, that's what Access Europe, the programme that I'm with, will help you to do. But you can't completely eliminate it. So you as an organisation have to be able to weather a little bit of risk. It's not core funding, as I said. Mostly there's a few kind of rare examples of operational funding, but by and large you kind of have to be getting into EU funding knowing that you're not going to get core costs out of it. And then, of course, national funding. There are examples, LEADER is an example of a national, European Social Fund is national. These are EU funds that have been kind of decentralised out to the Irish government, and they kind of become de facto Irish funding then. So those ones allow you to collaborate nationally. But most of the funding that I'm going to talk about today is that kind of partnership, that pan-European based European funding, which is the bulk of the opportunities that are out there, require some kind of international partnership, mostly. So look, I've done all my caveats now and my expectation setting, so we can actually start talking about some European funding programs now. So the first thing to note is that there are lots. This is a screenshot from our website, accesseurope.ie, and this is just some of them. There's way more than this. So, and you can see that they don't, sometimes they have like vague names like citizenship, equality, rights and values, European Solidarity Corps, Interreg Atlantic Area. Like, you don't look at them and instantly understand what they're going to fund. So, just to be aware that there are lots. I wouldn't possibly have time to go through them all today. However, I have gone through them all before at a laborious 2-hour webinar that I would really recommend. It's better to watch back rather than to have watched live, because at least when you're watching it back, you can skip over the programs that don't apply to you at all. But this is I did this a few months ago, and it's designed to either be an introduction to completely new people who've never heard of European funding, or for those that were involved in European funding and are wondering what changed with the MFF and what's different and what are the new programmes and what does the new landscape look at. So it looks at all of the different programmes that are applicable to the community voluntary / civil society. And it goes through them, and I try to provide an example project for each of them. So if you fancy some entertaining viewing, that's there. It's on our YouTube channel. But you can also look at our Access Europe EU funding guide. So that's that screenshot that I showed a second ago. You can click into all of them and find out more about them, find out what the policy behind them is, links to the Commission websites, links to if there is a national contact point in Ireland, which many of them do have, we link directly to them. There's loads of information if you want a bit more of a deep dive. But for the purposes of this short session, I wanted to focus on a couple of programmes that I think are particularly relevant to social enterprise. So the first one is Erasmus, and I know at least one of our people on our panel is going to talk about this. So the number one thing that often comes up with EU funding, and I've mentioned it, it's like they're not intuitively named programmes. If I could get whoever in Europe is in charge of naming stuff and wring their necks, I would, because I spent half my life explaining to people that yes, Erasmus is the university programme, but it's a lot bigger than that. So basically, those of you who, if you were involved in EU funding years and years ago, you'd know that there used to be loads of small programmes that were under the whole themes of education, training, youth and sport. So there was ones like Grundvig and the Lifelong Learning Programme and Leonardo da Vinci. These were all little small programmes. Well, in 2014, Erasmus, which was the biggest education programme, the one that we're all familiar with from universities and students going abroad and things like that, that absorbed all those little programmes into a big, huge programme called Erasmus Plus. Whenever you see a plus, it means that a bigger programme absorbs smaller programmes or programme. So now this is the EU's programme to support education, training, youth and sport. And you can see it's massive. It's doubled since the last MFF, and it's over 26 billion. So this is a huge programme. Now, a lot of that goes to students and university, and a lot of it goes to kind of specifically youth projects and things like that. But the policy strands that kind of underpin this are things like the skills agenda, but also social inclusion, the European Pillar of Social Rights, the green and digital transitions, promoting young people's participation in democratic life. So these are the kind of focuses of it. And again, like, people see it and they think, oh, well, we're not an education institute, so how would we apply for this? But you don't have to be. If your project, so many times, I talk to people and they could be an environmental organisation, they could be a homelessness organisation, they could be an arts organisation. But when they describe what they want to do, it's fundamentally about kind of non-formal education. They want to, create a new course or a new module or a new digital resource or information of some kind. They want to be able to pilot new materials. That's what Erasmus is about, and Erasmus will fund that. You don't have to be a formal education provider. In fact, they actively celebrate and encourage informal and non-formal education. So just to give an example, so it offers mobility. Mobility is more EU speak. It just means kind of exchanges and trips abroad and study abroad and job shadowing in different countries. That's what a mobility is. And then cooperation opportunities, which are more large-scale projects for higher education and for higher education, which is the universities. Vocational education and training is anything that's aimed at professionals. So the Wheel does Erasmus Plus projects, and we're working with professionals because we're working with the sector. So we do VET projects, vocational education and training projects. It also does school education, including early childhood education and care, adult education, which is if you're an organisation that's working with people in a non-professional capacity. So for example, if you're a homelessness organisation that's developing a life skills course for people who've experienced homelessness, that would be considered adult education because you're engaging with them as an adult, not as a professional. And then of course, youth and sport are other kind of huge parts of it. An example project here, this is one that the Wheel ran. It's called Scope, Skills Recognition, Capacity Building and Professional Development for the Third Sector. Another nice little feature of EU funding is very clumsy acronyms. There's an acronym for every project. The more vague, the better often. So this is a project that we developed. It was our first Erasmus Plus project. It began in 2018. It was Irish partners, the Wheel and Iontas. I often get the question, can you partner with other Irish partners? Yes, depending on the programme, but you have to even it out with more European partners. It can't look like a really Irish project. So we had partners then from Scotland, Finland, Latvia and Estonia, and we developed an online learning platform, learning content and a validation system. And it provided free, high quality education resources and recognition to the sector. We have modules based on all those things. This is all free and available, so you're very welcome to use it. And it was 296,000 budget. The other question, which I'll inevitably get, so I'll address now, is can you collaborate with UK partners? So no is the answer by and large. So the only exception would be the Peace Programme, of course, where you can collaborate with Northern Ireland. There is sometimes, this was pre the Brexit agreement growing into place. So anything that was signed before they triggered Article 50, the contracts were still honoured. But in general, I wouldn't be relying on UK partners, other than for peace, obviously. Sometimes you can make arguments to include non-EU partners in projects, but with the way that it was left and everything like that, I think it would need to be a pretty exceptional case for them to allow. Plus, it's more difficult for the UK partner then because they don't get their full funding. So in general, we're looking towards Europe for partnership in this. If you're interested in this, if any of your projects, and I'm more than happy to chat to anybody individually about their projects, and I'll leave my contact details. I have meetings with people all the time to talk to them about their funding opportunities. If you're interested in it though, we have a really excellent national contact point in Ireland, Lergus. So they manage international exchange programs. So they basically manage Erasmus Plus in Ireland. So their job is to promote the programme. They do excellent training. They can provide advice and kind of technical support throughout the application. And we're very lucky to have such a helpful national contact point. They also manage another one called the European Solidarity Corps, which I think Clough Jordan actually has benefited from that. That's a really interesting example where you can get kind of long-term volunteers to come and work with you over, young people over sometimes weeks or months, to kind of work on it, and you get a small fee for hosting them and providing them with work and stuff like that. So it's a nice opportunity for them to travel and to volunteer and to build language skills and things like that. And it's great for organisations to get kind of a steady stream of volunteers. So that's Lergus. I'd really recommend. You can also look at the Commission website, the Erasmus Plus Programme Guide and the application portal if you want to find more information about that. But I also wanted to touch on the Interregs. So did anybody have an experience with Interregs? Maybe show of hands. Yeah, couple. What was it like? Good? Yeah? Good? Okay, usually I get like the paperwork was awful, kind of like, that's, so good that people had a nice experience. So Interregs are just EU code again for interregional programmes. So they've kind of divided up Europe into different zones according to what interests a certain area have. So Ireland is part of about 4 of these different regions according to EU. So the first one is Northwest Europe. We're also within the Northern Periphery and Arctic region. We're within the Atlantic area region, and then there's Interreg Europe, which is the big one. So this is how they've kind of divided up, and they've decided that the Northwest Europe is kind of facing similar challenges, and a lot of them are to do with, we'll have a look, it's things like a smarter Europe, a greener Europe, a more connected Europe, a more social Europe, and a Europe closer to its citizens. So this is the cohesion policy. So when we talk about the policy that underpins the programme, Interreg is there to kind of implement the cohesion policy on the ground. So it aims to jointly tackle common challenges and find shared solutions in fields such as health, environment, research, education, transport, sustainable energy, and more. So these are huge programs. So Erasmus Plus is a nice little entry-level program. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the Erasmus Plus projects, you can start off quite entry level with them. There's little small projects for around 30,000, 60,000 where it's like purely exchanges you can do, purely kind of like learning networking where you don't produce any outputs, you literally just kind of host workshops and travel and build partnerships around Europe. So Erasmus Plus is a nice entry level in. And you can scale up then to larger projects. Interreg projects, there's a bit of a Freudian slip. Interreg projects tend to be much bigger. So you're looking at your, up on 1 million and plus. So it's something to bear in mind. We'll have a look at like a typical journey through European funding in a second. But just to bear in mind, these are bigger scale projects. An example of this is the school enterprises in Galway. So they had one called Biz Mentors. This is an Interreg project. It promoted community enterprise, well-being and social inclusion. It provided free access to business expertise and wisdom to people in businesses, social enterprise community groups. It was 1.3 million, 5 partners, 3 years, and it was to develop professional software that matches mentees to mentors for these specific types of supports. It was funded by the Northern Periphery and Arctic one, and it had partners from Finland, Iceland and Northern Ireland. So you're restricted in the partners you can choose for Interreg because it has to be those within that region. So that's an example of a project there. If you're interested anymore, obviously there's loads more you can read about our website, but you can also reach out. Again, we have national contact points for the Interreg programmes in Ireland. So you have Patrick Devine in the Northwest Regional Assembly, Sarah Davern in the Southern Regional Assembly, Travis O'Doherty in the Northwest Regional Assembly, and Travis O'Doherty in Northwest Regional Assembly for that one as well. So a couple of them are sharing them. So you can reach out to them and they can provide you with more support. There's only been a couple of Interreg deadlines so far this year. So I'd imagine next year and the year after they'll be amping up the deadlines because they have to spend their money, obviously. So that one's an interesting one to watch. Another one, and this I'm just doing 3 programs, and then we'll look briefly at how you can get started if you're interested. This one is, this was a previous program, the Employment and Social Innovation, or EASY program. It used to be a standalone program that was managed in Brussels. Now it has been absorbed into the European Social Fund. And what happens when a bigger program absorbs a smaller program? It's ESF Plus. So now it's a branch within ESF Plus. And they've decided to appoint a national contact point for it now to help promote it. So it never had a national contact point before. It just lived in Brussels. But now they've put it as part of ESF Plus as a bigger programme and appointed a national contact point. And the Wheel is actually the national contact point for this. So we were just appointed officially kind of over the summer to be the national contact point in Ireland to provide the kind of technical support and information that's needed to applicants to help them access the funding. So this is a particularly interesting one, I think, for social enterprises because it aims to support employment, social policy and labour mobility across Europe. So it's strengthening employment skills, improving social protection and inclusion, improving labour markets and ensuring fair labour mobility and fostering safe and fair working conditions. So this one I think is particularly interesting because there's that social innovation element to it, which is obviously very relevant to social enterprises. And because it would be very much in line with kind of the work integrated social enterprises as well. I think that there will be opportunities under this one. Now there's only been one funding deadline so far for this, and that was before we were appointed as national contact point. So we're expecting that lots more will come next year. So it's a bit of a kind of watch this space with this one, but we will of course be keeping people very informed about this one because we have a special interest in it. And I think it's one that would be of interest to people here. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the, a very easy kind of entry-level program. You've got Erasmus Plus if you're looking to kind of dip your toe in the water. If you're a bit more experienced and you want to take on a bigger challenge, you could look at Interreg, which is a little bit kind of higher level. And then there's also then a kind of more specific one to social enterprises, which is the Employment and Social Innovation Fund. But if anything that we say or that I've said jumps out at you, or you read more on our website, or God love you, go back and watch that 2-hour YouTube video, and you think, oh, I really want to find out more about this, and how do I get started with EU funding? Or I've done 1 or 2 projects, but I don't know how to do it more strategically. The way I kind of break it down is to kind of divide it into, sit down and make a plan. I suppose that's the first thing. And I always divide it into 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So if you're completely new, maybe within the first 2 years, your goal is just to start small, do a couple of small projects, build your capacity, build a network. But if you can be a partner first, where you're not the coordinator, it's definitely a lot easier. But you want to build your network of partners that you trust, that you have a good relationship with, that you can imagine going further with in terms of bigger scale projects. You're also then internally building your own systems and capacity, your ability to complete the application, your financial management systems, your administrative systems, all of those things. If you start off in kind of a low stakes and ease yourself in, it's more likely to be a positive experience than throwing yourself into a massive project and finding the whole thing really traumatic, which often happens, unfortunately. Then, your goal within 5 years could be to start scaling up. You want to start leading projects, maybe if you've only partnered. You want to further develop your capacity and your EU network and your ability to take on bigger budget, more challenging projects. And then within 10 years, you could be looking at running multiple projects at once, pursuing higher budget projects, more ambitious projects. So you could start, if you were an arts organisation, for example, you could start with a quite small Erasmus Plus project. Maybe within 5 years, you're taking on a Creative Europe project, which are bigger budget projects specific for the creative industry, but very competitive and tend to be much bigger budgets. And then within 10 years, you could be partnering on a big Horizon Europe project, which is the big research innovation programme with universities and things like that, to produce kind of cutting edge research into arts and heritage and culture and things like that. So that's a typical, usually people just throw themselves in somewhere in that, but that would be an ideal pathway to get started. Once you make your plan and you look and you say, right, this is what we want to do in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you'll also identify knowledge gaps, things that's like, well, we can't get started because we don't know how to do this, or we don't know how to do that, or we need more information about that. So as you identify, note down all your knowledge gaps, and then reach out to Access Europe to get the information you need to fill those gaps. So Access Europe, as Philip said, we're a support programme for EU funding in Ireland. So we provide people with information. We research all of the different funding opportunities that are out there. We condense them on our websites. We interpret all the deadlines into a monthly, easy to scan newsletter that's completely free. So you can subscribe to that. So that'll keep you up to date on information and deadlines and things like that when they come out. You can also attend our events and training. So I'll show you a few more of them now in a minute. But things like this, kind of advice sessions and training sessions. You can get help desk support, so you can arrange a meeting with me or one of my team where we can kind of talk you through how you might get started and your idea and where it belongs in the whole EU funding kind of ecosystem. And then also network building. So we help people to connect with partners, and we provide a lot of support in partnership building, including training and an online platform that we have, which I think should be here. So this is our partner database. So this is not just for promoting, it encourages organisations to set up a profile, which we then promote throughout Europe in the hope that more Irish organisations will get invited into projects as partners. But it's not just about promoting your organisation, it also helps you to kind of formulate and communicate your strategy. So as you're filling out your profile for the website, you'll notice that it asks you questions like, what would you like to do in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? So it kind of encourages you to put a strategy in place. And to look at what are your strengths, what kind of things are you interested in terms of partnership. And as I said, we promote it for you then. And then you're also kind of building your network. So, the partnership database is one part of it, but there's more, you have to be proactive about it yourself as well. So you're looking at building connections cross-sector here in Ireland. So maybe engaging with researchers, engaging with local authorities around European funding, reaching out to equivalents across Europe. So there's a whole training on partnership development, but a great thing would be joining European networks in your area of work. That's a really easy, straightforward way of connecting with kind of like-minded individuals. You're looking at the gaps that need to be filled. So say, for example, an organisation like the Wheel, when we were building that online platform, like we have no digital learning capacity in the Wheel, so we needed to bring in a partner with that expertise. We have no in-house research capacity, not kind of academic-wise anyway. So if we need to do a piece of research as part of a project, we need to have university partners. So it's about kind of looking at the gaps of what you want to achieve and what skills need to be brought in. When you talk about joining or building a European network, it can be a little bit daunting, but you only really need a couple of good connections, and then they connect you with their partners and they connect you with their partners. So it's not like you have to, build hundreds of contacts by yourself. It's just a few good quality connections can lead to opportunities and invitations, and can make it easier then when you want to write an application that you have reliable people you can bring in. There's a full training on European partnership development there that you can click through and watch if you're interested in, where I go through a step-by-step process of how to build a consortium. And then you're finding the right opportunities. So, if you decide that you want to go for Erasmus Plus, which is usually in like March or April every year, most of the deadlines, sometimes there's another one in October. So you want to go for that, you have to start by designing your project, then build your partnership, and then get writing your application. And you can see that we have a whole series there. So starting with the introduction to European programs, and then designing your project, building your project, and writing your project, all available for free on our YouTube channel. And then, of course, us as well, if you need to reach out. So it's myself and my colleagues, Emily and Christina, our website, our Twitter, and our email. If you have any questions throughout the process, we're there to kind of support you the full length, including if you get the funding then, and you're, having to manage it for the first time and you have questions and things like that. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's Access Europe. That's the programme that I'm talking about now. And all of the things that we provide, which I've gone through already. I think that's it. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. It's fantastic to hear a presentation about European funding. I feel I'm a bit biased because I always think the social enterprise and the not-for-profit sector is where there are solutions for many of the challenges we see in our community. And so often I think we talk about where there is opportunities exist to help organizations with innovating what they do, whether that's building more capacity, whether that's being able to add a new dimension to what they already do that's not yet funded, to be able to see that there's so many opportunities present that maybe that organizations in Ireland could really dip their toe into the water, as you said, like now's the time to do it in terms of that funding timeline. If you do have questions, we'll be doing a Q&A later, so that you can kind of ask Emma maybe some more practical or pointed questions about what you might be relevant to you. Our next speaker is Dr. Oliver Moore from Clough-Jordan Community Farm. For those who know Clough-Jordan, I don't need to tell you that it's one of the most unique and interesting places that does exist in Ireland. And if you don't, I'm sure you'll be quite impressed by what Oliver has come to share with you about their work. Just briefly, Clough-Jordan Community Farm is a social enterprise. It's a member-owned kind of farm that's based on the Tipperary-Offaly border. They use biodynamic and organic approaches to their farming practices to produce very high quality and quite nutritious kind of vegetables. They also work very hard to reduce the environmental impact that their work is having locally. They supply over 70 households weekly. These are paid member households that have a subscription, and that's who they work with. That's who kind of comprises their community farm. They generate enough traded income through the membership that affords them the funding to be able to have paid farmers, so farmers with a proper salary, to lease the land, purchase seed equipment, and cover the kind of overhead of their expenses. So it's kind of full cost recovery model. And as Emma alluded to, and I'm sure Oliver will mention, they also provide European opportunities for younger Europeans traveling to Ireland who work on the farm and participate kind of in the growing and harvesting and the labour that's involved throughout the entire year. So I am very happy to invite Oliver to be our next speaker. Thank you so much, Oliver. Welcome.
Cheers. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Oliver Moore, so I'll talk about the farm specifically today, not so much the rest of the eco-village and so on, but I can talk about that as well because I'm a member of the eco-village, I live in the eco-village, and entities in the eco-village actually do Horizon projects and some other work as well, but we do Erasmus, and it's actually quite beneficial in a lot of different ways. But I'll follow the structure I've been given, which was great actually. It's great to be given a structure because I could just go on and be very loose. And this is mostly pictures, this presentation. So I'm going to just explain a little bit about why I think we should support community farms in this presentation. So a community farm is a farm where the risks, responsibilities and rewards of farming are shared to some extent between consumers and producers. Okay? The risks, responsibilities and rewards, they're the things that are shared. So it's not a typical model of farming, and it's not a typical model of community development. It's just an approach to farming where the consumer takes on a bit of responsibility, gets the rewards of the produce, but there's always a little bit of risk because of crop failures, because of weather extremes. It can be a good year, it can be a bad year. And that's part of the story of how every community farm functions. Is there oh, there it is, yeah. So our community farm was formed in 2010. We did a crowdfunding in an intentional community. So not everybody can do this, but this is how we started. So we brought people together who'd already relocated to Cloughjordan to start an eco-village. And we crowdfunded amongst the community to buy the infrastructure, basically, to set up a farm. So one of the things I'll be saying to you at the end of this presentation is there are easier ways to do it than the way we did it. So we took a long and complicated way to set this up, and we did it in such a way that because our community had a certain amount of sort of inbuilt capacity, but also maybe thought it could do more than it could, to be honest. So we did a lot, and you could do things much more simply than we do. There was good local buy-in. The board of directors had people from the local ag college and so on involved. And at the start, we were quite big. We had 30 acres with dairy, veg, some meat, and 3 different producers. Our memos and arts, because of the time limit, I'm not going to go through each of these, but our memos and arts back in 2010 just described how we wanted to produce food locally and have a cooperation with the community and provide opportunities for education and so on. But I'm sure the presentation will be available. You can look into it in more detail. And so our subsidiary aims involve social inclusion, community development, wider participation, and providing for social, economic, and cultural needs in the community. To cut a long story short, we became one farm rather than 2 around 2015. Which I'm also describing as the local community business incubation service that we provided. So what I mean by that is a community farm can only provide so much for very ambitious local businesses. So we noticed an emerging thing whereby the local milk producers who were part of the farm wanted to grow beyond what we could actually consume. There's only 700 people in Cloughjordan village itself in total, and only about 120 in the eco-village. So if you're quite ambitious and you want to sell in cities, you'll probably move on from the eco-village. And that's happened to us a few times. But you have to kind of see it as you're incubating local businesses, giving them a guaranteed income for a couple of years to get themselves started. And then they can break away, break free, and you can still have a relationship with them. So we've done that 3 times now with 3 different entities. So I'm seeing ourselves very positively as a business incubation service rather than a group of people who lost something, because we did lose something in a sense, but we also, the overall community gained, and you'll see the examples of that later on. So this is where we technically are. So this is the farm down here, and that's the town of Cloughjordan, and this is the eco-village bit of Cloughjordan. That's the amphitheatre bit there that we also built just for the crack, built an amphitheatre out of a pile of subsoil. Anyway, that's a different story. So what the services we provide, I would say, are produce, useful and meaningful participation, learning opportunities, facilities, other opportunities to develop other aspects of cultural and social and economic activity, and what I'm calling here ecosystem services, so agricultural and biodiversity services. Our pricing is done through participatory budgeting, I'm going to show you our accounts at the end of the presentation. We have a flat fee. Participatory budgeting means we all come together, we figure out how much it costs to actually do the thing, and then we charge ourselves the amount it costs to pay that. So rather than going to a shop and buying stuff for a certain price, we literally, it's a very adult way to approach the cost of things. We literally look at all the costs, look at how much we want to pay our farmers, what rate per hour we want to pay, and then we self-tax basically. We charge ourselves the amount that it really costs to run a farm. That actually works out at 16 quid a week per adult. Now the system, we've chosen a system whereby kids go free. And if you have 3 or 4 or 5 kids, that's amazing. And if you're 3 adults in one household, it's not amazing. So we're constantly in dialogue about how we should do it. And we've an AGM coming up in a month's time, and all of these things will be trashed out again. We have a take what you need, think you should, ethos, or leave enough for others. So this will all be clearer when I show you the pictures that are about to come up. But we don't do a box scheme where you're guaranteed a certain amount in a box. We just have a building where you collect stuff. So you'll see it now anyway in a sec. So that's just an example of the range of veg that we produce typically. We produce about 50 different types of crops in a given year, 10 to 15 tons. Maybe more like, we're doing up the accounts for this year and we're figuring out how much we produced. It's probably a lot more than 15 tons actually this year. There's probably about 15 tons of potatoes alone actually this year. So anyway, this is what I picked up one week. This is, in August, it's just an example. This is another example. So like, we could be simple and just have 4 or 5 core crops and charge ourselves maybe a tenner a week. Instead, we have 50 different crops and we charge ourselves 16 quid a week. And in the summer, it's amazing. In the winter, it's not so good, is a quick way of putting it. But we also produce, coriander seeds. This was in the delivery area when I went up there last week. And lots of flowers and things for tea. And the more you process, the better value it is. This is where people pick up the veg. So you basically turn up here and take what you need, or take what you think you should, and leave enough for everyone else. We tend to put the high value stuff up here, because this guy's quite tall, but we tend to put the high value stuff a little bit further back, and put the, come on, take it now, will you, stuff at the front here. So we're constantly, people know what seasonality is, but we're constantly nudging people towards courgettes and potatoes and whatever we've got an abundance of, kale usually. It's very social as well then. These are some of the European volunteers we have. But it becomes a bit of a social hub, the distribution area as well. Participation is another thing that happens. These are people, usually it's planting and harvesting of crops like onions and potatoes. The local community can come along and have a say in what's produced and how it's produced and what we want to do. But also sometimes there's work involved. It's very social as well. We only have 8 acres of land and we produce all this activity. Even in lockdown, there were opportunities for engagement. We got leader funding for a whole lot of sort of festival equipment basically and entertainment equipment. So we got a barbecue, seating, a few gazebos, solar lights and so on. In the wider community then, we create a space for people to have a bit of crack. That's one of our ESC volunteers as well, who came back 4 or 5 times to the community. We organise events, conferences and so on, where we try and encourage people to produce food in a different kind of way. That's Richard Corrigan there with the local butcher on the farm in 2011. And you can see the Minister of State, Minister Hackett there at a Feeding Ourselves conference we do every year. So we bring international youth to Ireland as well, to rural Ireland. So this woman is originally from, her family is from Bolivia or Colombia, Bolivia I think. And this guy's from Spain. They were members of the farm, they were volunteers on a 1-year Erasmus last year. She's still in Jordan, and that's the thing that's actually happened, that people have actually stayed on beyond their 1 year and become members of the community, working elsewhere, forming relationships with people and so on. And here's more examples of the ESC people. So we do a system whereby people come for a year and they come with a budget and they end up, there's enough of them that it employs people to manage them. So we end up creating 110, 120 labour hours a week of work on this little 6 acres to 8 acres of land. that we have. So, you get a budget for managing the people that you bring, and then they pay rent in the community, they buy, it generates, you'll see in a second anyway how much it generates. And then these buildings as well are education buildings that we've built as well. Again, these are through micro grants, through Lurgus. We're currently looking for, we've got an application in to build a sauna, because why not build a sauna? Because it's like, if you're working hard all day, you should have a sauna at night. Be realistic, demand the impossible, We produce, we communicate with our membership as well. I'm just keeping in mind my time here. Ecosystem services are things like, I keep saying 6 to 8 acres, because 2 acres of land is constantly in green manures. So this helps with biodiversity, helps with soil quality. And I won't talk about that much more now, but that's just part of the knock-on effects, the positive knock-on effects. Bear in mind, this 8 acres might have been doing very little otherwise. It used to be part of a dairy farm. It might have held 1.5 livestock units, which, contributes something to the region, but not as much as I would say as we're contributing. So even these, we seed save a lot, and that's really good for pollinators. This is the seed saving event we held last week. Seed saving saves money, as well as creating cultural biodiversity. This is the Tipperary turnip. We're the only people growing it in Tipperary. And we developed our own onion as well, specifically to deal with our climate and so on. And we organise training events and so on that we can charge into, like for people to do seed saving. But business incubation, so we set up an online farmers market because we had the capacity and the nimbleness to do it. So the region then, producers from the region can kind of sell at a farmers market in the space that we rent in an enterprise centre. So that's the market, that's how it works. It's a digital farmers market, so people pre-order in advance and then they come up and collect, so the farmer doesn't have to spend all day standing around hoping to make money. And these are some of the businesses that sell there. You end up having to upskill a lot. That's an example of how many courgettes we have to deal with. So you end up doing things like making chutneys or making pestos from kale and so on. So it's just skills in the community. But people could end up making little micro businesses out of this stuff as well. In governance terms, this is the fun bit now. So these are the areas we work in: production, infrastructure, distribution, membership, volunteers, education, communication, and board. So I'm on the board. What we do is we have coordination once a month where we come together to check for synergies and conflicts, and then we just keep working in our domains. So it's not a top-down structure whereby the board does everything. It's a horizontal structure, more or less, unless somebody wants to do something, risky, and then the board has to kind of step in. But the idea is that everything will be flagged early enough that doesn't happen. So that's how it is. So coordination, because coordination has about 20 people doing stuff, I don't feel too much pressure on the board. I just have to keep an eye on, big sort of spends and unusual risks. That's it, really. But if you really want to see the detail, that is it in detail, how it works and how they relate to each other. But with the amount of time I have left, I'm definitely not going to talk about that now. But this is the bit people are probably most interested in, the cash. So we bring in about 60 grand in membership fees, and we spend about that anyway. And obviously we're aiming to, we're not aiming to make money, we're aiming to circulate income, produce vegetables, and employ farmers. So this is excluding grant aid, ESC, and donations. So, we do the odd extra little thing, and these are standard enough fees. They're lower as well because we use organic methods. So we're purchasing seeds, but you can see there's no fertilizer, there's no fees because there's no animals in the system and so on. So it's not particularly expensive setup, but if you can get together 60 grand, you can do this. Now there's easier and simpler ways to do it than the way we do it, but that's an example of what you can do. In more detail, this is everything. So this is the income, including all the grants and so on. So you can see here all these grants, but look what it gets to in the end, 205,000 euros. So like this 6 to 8 acres of land generates and circulates 205,000 euros in the local community, right? Now we don't make a profit really, but we employ 5 or 6 people part-time, nearly full-time, and we turn around that much money. So these grants are for things like the volunteers who come we have 8 volunteers in the system. Sometimes 1 or 2 drop out, but that's just an example of it. And then like some of the building work we were doing was getting funding and the like. But so with Oh, that's me telling myself I should stop. Now you all know I've gone over. Damn. Okay, so I'll have to keep going there. I've just listed out some of the other expenses then as well. So we're breaking even basically because we have a certain amount of money in the bank and we have loans that we're servicing, but we're trying to break even really and generate all of this activity and life. Key takeaways, just to finish up then. Member subs basically covers the running costs of the farm. We do well with sourcing funding for volunteers for on-site courses and trainings and for upgrading of infrastructure, but we could survive without it. We could just have 1.5 full-time farmers and some seasonal help, and that would do the job, but wouldn't be as much fun as what we do. There's a huge range of social good happens with this socially orientated farm with an official structure, generating and circulating income locally while creating lots of opportunities. 205,000 euros has a big impact on a village of 800 people. And these sorts of opportunities can work with others too. So there are 4 organisations in Cloughjordan now that have learned from us and that they themselves now take on ESC volunteers. So there's about 15 ESC volunteers in Cloughjordan village and region last year, whereas initially there was like woofers, just like informal volunteers. Now there's 15 in the town just this year. It might be less next year, it might be more. But that's a big impact in a small town. And every 4 or 5 people that you bring in is like a part-time job for somebody to manage them. I mean, that's a good job. It's a nice job. So the whole kind of region gets this life. Like the local soccer team won the league with this amazing Spanish guy who was that tall guy, Jorge. Like he was just miles better than everyone in the region at soccer. Like, and you're just bringing in such a level. Like it's almost unfair on the rest of North Tip. Like that we had him playing for the year, But my advice, I know I've gone over now, but just because, I would just say you can start small and simple. You can approach a farmer for one crop. You can approach a farmer and say, we want an acre of potatoes. We're going to give you £3 a kilo. So you get 45, say he does 15 tons of organic potatoes. It's going to be a lower yield. He's guaranteed 45 grand then for that acre of land. That's like the average industrial wage. That's for 1 acre of land. And a community can do that. And that's so much more simple than what we did. But from that you could build out and you could maybe add in extra crops. You could add in milk, you could add in like a pig or whatever. And the way to do it, just like there's groups already formed. Everyone has about 50 WhatsApp groups they're in. That's your potential base for a community relationship with a producer. Wholesale purchasing is an even easier way to start. So we actually buy in about 5,000 euros worth of vegetables as well to supplement what we have as well. We get that at wholesale prices, right? So if you form a club, and you spend more than 500 euros, you can get wholesale prices, even from a wholesalers. I would say as well, just do it. Don't be too ideologically methods. Like we were very biodynamic back in the day, and we are again now. But like in between, we also just put up a lot more polytunnels because you have to kind of service people's real needs with families. Like you have to keep the cost down. Like we should probably have 3 or 4 more polytunnels. We only have like 5 or 6 polytunnels at the moment. We probably should have 10 if we're being super productive and just thinking about productivity, but we're thinking about a lot of other things as well. I would say it's important to keep engaging, keep emphasising the social and other benefits to keep people involved. But do think of costs and scale and efficiency. The cost of living crisis is a reality for people. And you can use your CSA to leverage to generate socially beneficial, potentially funded activities to vitalise your part of the world, as I've shown to some extent. So yeah, that's me gone a little bit over, but that's the farm in Cloughjordan, so thanks.
That was a wonderful presentation, and I love the photos. It does not, and I hope you don't mind me saying, it doesn't compare to actually visiting Cloughjordan. If anybody has, you'll know that, and if you haven't, I'd say put it on the list. It is an extraordinary place, and the people are amazing. So thank you, Oliver. Our next social enterprise and our speaker, whom we'd like to highlight, is the Leitrim Design House, and we're joined by its manager, Emma Cunningham. The Leitrim Design House is a non-profit organisation and a social enterprise that's work is around nurturing and promoting Irish craftsmanship and assisting, I suppose, small craft and design businesses. It was established in 2000 by the Leitrim County Enterprise Board and has become one of the more progressive examples of a small social enterprise supporting Irish craftsmanship here in Ireland. It does receive funding that goes towards its staff costs. That's done through the Department of Rural Community Development, as well as through its Community Services Programme, the CSP funding that many of you are aware of. They work very, very closely with, obviously, their manufacturers and their designers, as well as with the local enterprise office in Leitrim, who also deliver services on their behalf. Earlier this morning, I was sitting in the car with Orla, and I was just saying how many of traditional Irish craft and those skills seem to be at risk of kind of being lost. So it's wonderful to see social enterprises that part of their social good is to kind of support those small manufacturers getting their work out there. So lovely to have you, Emma. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, so hi, we're delighted to be here today just to tell you a little bit about Leitrim Design House and the business. Okay. So just a little bit of a background just around the business. So in 1996, the Leitrim County Enterprise Board conducted extensive research into the arts and crafts sector in the county. So Leitrim has always had a very high percentage of creative businesses. And then in 2000, following on from this research, the Leitrim Design House was formally created as a space for makers to showcase their work, also offer support and training, and as a resource for them to, as a market, as a retail, as a route to market. So prior to receiving CSP funding, we would have received some funding under the Peace programmes. So that was in 2001, 2003, and this was to stimulate job creation in the creative sector. So we're housed in the Dock Art Centre in Carrick-on-Shannon, which is a restored courthouse. So that's since 2005, and we would see about 20,000 visitors annually. So there's a theatre there, galleries, workshop rooms and events. So we're two separate businesses, and we would see a lot of tourists as well during the summer and support locally as well. So we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we showcase 100% Irish craft design. So everything that we stock is handmade and designed in Ireland. And we have makers then from across Ireland. We currently have about 140 makers. So in a range of disciplines, ceramics, jewellery, textiles and wood. So the Leitrim Design House staff are supported by a board of directors. So the board just ensure that there's relevant and effective delivery of services. So 40% of the board come from the creative sector. So that would be from retail, visual artists, designers, and that just adds to the experience and the knowledge that can be passed on then to the staff, and just in terms of creating sustainability for the business. So then just in operations, so we're currently funded by Pobble under their community service programme, and that would be where we would receive our core funding from. The contract is usually a 3-year contract, which we have just submitted our application for, which will start in January, hopefully. And that is a wage contribution for the staff. So we currently employ 6 staff in total, 2 full-time and 4 part-time staff. And because the hours are limited, it's important that staff have a variety of skills to cover and deliver all the programmes and events that we run. So we would have a marketing assistant, 2 gallery and sales assistants, project coordinator, administrator and manager. So everyone works really closely together, and everyone has their role and work as a team. So we would also collaborate with strategic partners in terms of projects. So this would be Creative Ireland, Design and Crafts Council to deliver workshops, events and programmes. And as well, we would support job initiatives such as TOOS or CE schemes, and this offers short-term support to the core staff. And all of these just strengthen the creative sector, particularly the Made Local campaign, which last year, at the end of 2021, 70% of Irish adults had bought local or supported local, and another survey by the Enterprise Office that 60% were more aware because of the Look for Local and Made for Local campaigns. So all of those are really important just for raising the awareness of the creative sector. So then the services that we deliver, we would offer 3 key services. So the first is an opportunity for makers to showcase their work. So that would be in the retail gallery itself. We work on a sale or return basis, that's the business model, with Leitrim Design House taking commission on sales. We do have a membership option that allows makers to have a smaller commission or have a lower commission, and that they can also avail of training, but we have paused that just with COVID, but their rates have remained the same as with it. So we also provide training and support to the network. So this would be in collaboration with the Leo office. So this would be training and support, mentoring one-to-one. So depending on what their needs are, particularly now after the pandemic, there was demand for photography, updating of websites. So whatever their needs are, we kind of listen to that and we kind of organise training and events then around that. So we would also then organise a number of events in line with national events such as for Crinny and Ogue, August Craft Month, Heritage Day, Culture Night. So they would be in collaboration as well with Creative Ireland, might be Design and Crafts Council. We would also have a number of Meet the Maker events throughout the year. So it's just an opportunity for makers to meet their customers and for customers to learn about the skills and the ideas behind the businesses. So as part of developing and showcasing the creative sector, with Creative Art we received funding this year from Creative Ireland and Design and Crafts Council, and a local photographer, Brian Farrell, visited 14 Leitrim makers. So that's just 2 of the images from the book. So it's all about just how Leitrim inspires people and the area, so we're delighted to have this printed. So that was a project that we worked on this year. Okay. And for traded income, the traded income is all invested back into the business. There's a small amount is to top up the wages because the public funding is a contribution. So it will go towards marketing, the training and events, and just raising awareness about the brand and supporting the makers. So it will also be facilitating the Meet the Maker events, as it allows makers the opportunity to have an additional income and to raise their profile as well. So it's all about telling the story of the makers, where they're from, and people investing in the business then. Our targets are, in terms of sales, would be 6% year on year. So there was a drop obviously with COVID over the last 2 years of up to 50%, but we're optimistic now that we'll return to our 2019 targets this year. And then just continued growth online and development, so raising the brand awareness and footfall. We did a lot of work over COVID with developing our website and adding more to it. And some projects this is just some tea towels and some lavender bags that are images of Leitrim and Carrick. So some products like that we add to the range that are unique to Leitrim and just something different for the customer as well. So then for funding, we would receive our core funding from Hubble. We would also tender and deliver services on behalf of the Leo each year. And then we would apply for funding from Design and Crafts Council and Creative Ireland. And this might be in terms of projects or the book. So that would be, the projects depend on what funding is available in the year. We're also just delivering a Creative Heartlands project, which is a collaboration between Leitrim, Sligo and Roscommon County Councils. So this is to strengthen economic growth of the creative sector. It's funded by Enterprise Ireland, and there was investment in equipment such as editing suites, 3D printers, so it's a way of training makers and raising the awareness of and upskilling for the sector. We would also apply for leader funding and relevant funding. So in 2019 we ran a leader marketing program, which took place every 2 weeks, and it was a marketing and business training particularly for Leitrim makers. So it just finished up then online, but that sort of training that we would also run. So then just any advice, I suppose we would do a lot of work around strategic planning, just that you're planning ahead, and also in terms of lean planning, that you have your business plans, your strategic plans, but that you also review the results, and then you are revising your plan based on that results. Also to know your customer and your network and to listen to them. So any feedback that we get from customers, we would have introduced a number of lower price point gifts, so gifts for teachers or Secret Santa, and also just in terms of for makers, that they have more opportunities for training, and just based on their needs. So then continuous growth with strong online presence, so that all images have all posts have a strong imagery, and that there's consistency between the online website, the gallery itself, and social media. There's consistency in the branding, in the imagery, and the quality, and that there's relevant facts that for customers to be informed about. And also then the ability just to change with trends and demands, so that a number of staff took part in the the Green for Micro campaign. So with that, we have changed the bubble wrap to the paper alternative. We've also got rid of the brown plastic packing tape. We have the paper tape. So we're aiming to work towards plastic-free packaging. So it's something that the customer was looking for, but also the suppliers are also keen to do this, with a number having plastic-free packaging as well. And then also, in terms of recruiting staff, that when you're limited to your staff hours, that you have skilled staff that are passionate about the work. Most of our staff come from the creative sector, so they're passionate about the business, they're passionate about explaining to the customer that the work that's done. We've also created some point of sale cards in store for every maker that has a little bit about the business. So it's nice for customers to see the face behind the business and who they're supporting when they're buying local. So we also would gift wrap all online orders and just provide a thank you card. So it's just that extra little bit of customer service, and that you have the best quality service. And that's just our website, the leitrimdesignhouse.ie, and we're based in Carrick-on-Shannon, and across our social media is the Leitrim Design House as well.
Wonderful to see a shop and hear about all the incredible work that belies just that image, and the number of people who are involved. 140 makers, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a shocking amount of talent, isn't it, in one room? I'll be popping next time I'm in Carrick. Thank you, Emma. Our last speaker here to speak is Michael Ward from Mullingar Employment Action Group. They are a non-profit organisation whose work is around supporting people who experience unemployment in the region. And they were set up, I hope I got this right, 1986. And that's an incredible amount of work that probably happened in those years. They run a number of social enterprises, and this is quite unique. They're not, it's not a simple model where there's a single program to be able to support people with this issue around unemployment. There is a range of programs, including an enterprise centre, an action recycling program, the uniform boutique, as well as a number of other kind of European funded projects. And Michael is the manager. He's here to talk to us today, particularly about their action recycling program and its model, as well as the uniform boutique, as well as talk about some of their organisation's experience running EU funded programs, which we hope will be quite useful to you for anyone who's thinking about putting their toe in the water. So thank you so much, Michael, for being here. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm very happy to be here to listen to all the previous speakers and be away here for the launch of the tool earlier on. We actually have a similar one. Well, not similar, but it might be something of interest to the same audience as well, which we've a European project just finished on. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later. But we'll start off with kind of the business model and the general overview of the action group, which put into a press. Oh, yeah, okay, perfect. As Philip said, the Action Group was founded back in 1986 when Mullingar was particularly badly hit unemployment black spot. And it was started with a meeting of local business leaders and community leaders who got together to see if they could put together something to try and tackle unemployment in the region. And out of that came a number of projects, one of them being an enterprise centre, which was the first business. And the official did the enterprise centre in Bishopsgate Street in Mullingar. The community enterprise centre was opened in 1990, and at that stage the Action Group was incorporated as a not-for-profit company to manage that resource. So in general, the aims and objectives of the Action Group is to manage enterprise and incubation space, which supports entrepreneurs and local business startups, with a view to creating employment and generating economic activity in the area. To create a community image aimed at promoting Mullingar as a town of enterprise and initiative. I suppose one of the big challenges for Mullingar is that we're so close to Dublin. And we're kind of a feeder town into Dublin, is kind of the local market and so on. So one of the challenges for us is to reverse commute and get people commuting from Dublin into Mullingar to work there, where we have plenty of good infrastructure. And to engage with organisations, individuals locally, nationally, internationally, collaborate with them to learn from them. And this is where European projects come in, where we get to learn from experts in similar fields from all over Europe, from universities to private organisations to cooperatives or social enterprises like ourselves and state agencies and so on. So it's a huge benefit and resource for the Action Group. I'm going to skip that. I'll go on to this one first and I'll come back to the human resource we have. So this is kind of the overview or the strategic management chart for the Action Group. So you can see we've got a number of different interests or activities, which are all kind of come under the umbrella of the Mullingar Employment Action Group. So we've got two enterprise centres at this stage now. So the Mullingar Community Enterprise Centre that I mentioned opened in 1990, and then we have another building that opened in 2009, just in time for the big crash, actually. Actually, it was built during the crash, and it opened officially in 2009. So those two centres, we have a uniform boutique, which is a school uniform business we have, which contributes to the wages and the overhead of the Action Group. We run CJI schemes on behalf of the DSP. We have the recycling scheme Philip mentioned, which is a public funded community service programme. And then we have European projects. So that's the bulk of what we do. There's other bits and pieces that we also get involved in, but that's the main sort of, I suppose the five main things, the job activation programmes, the public CSP, the EU projects, the uniform boutique, and then the enterprise incubation. I'll go back then. So this is, as I say, there's some companies and we have CE schemes and CSP schemes, but this is actually the resource that's available to the Action Group, I suppose, to manage all of those bits and pieces. So we have a board, a volunteer board of management. The chairman is in the room with me here today. He was actually one of the founder members of the Action Group, so he's been with the organisation for, in one way or another, since 1986, and currently sitting on the board as the chairman. I think he's the last surviving original member. We have a general manager, which is myself. We have a projects coordinator who works purely on Erasmus Plus projects. We have some other organisations or people from organisations that volunteer on the projects, usually from within the two enterprise centres. If we're working on projects that are of specific interest to them, and they're happy to get involved and volunteer and help us out. We have a accounts clerk of payroll who's a JI participant. We've a CE assistant supervisor and a CE supervisor, so we've two staff there. The uniform boutique is staffed by CE participants and managed from our office, from our paid staff. Receptionists in the enterprise centres, CE scheme participants, cleaners and caretakers within the enterprise centre, CE participants. So that's what we're working with from a human resource point of view. So the run-on cost, if we take out wages in and wages out on CE schemes and so on, CSP schemes, this is basically the contribution to the umbrella organisation, the Monaghan Action Group, and this is the sort of the different schemes and programmes we're involved in, what they contribute to materials, wages and overhead for the actual organisation itself. So we got involved with Erasmus Plus in 2015, was our first project, and as you can see it's become a very important part of our funding model. This chart relates to the last 30 months. So it's probably a little bit skewed in that during COVID and at that time we offered a lot of rent forgiveness and stuff like that to support the local enterprises, and we got much more invested in enterprise or Erasmus Plus projects because it helped to balance the deficit in workload and the deficit in finance. So from that point of view, it was a godsend for us to be diversified in that way, so we could make those sort of decisions. The other one, the uniform boutique, which we'll talk about in a bit as well, is our own sort of going concern or private enterprise, and it's purely as a fundraiser, but also offers great links with the community and the schools and so on. The employment activation is mostly money in, money out in form of wages and so on. So the overall turnover for all the groups, or for all the companies within the Action Group, is about $1.25 million every year. But again, a lot of that is wages in, wages out, and CE and CSP and so on. So yeah, that's what we're working with, and that's the balance. And the beauty of it is that we're, like I say, with COVID, you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. So we are kind of diversified enough to be able to juggle a little bit and to focus where the opportunities are. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about each part then. So the enterprise supports, or the enterprise centres. The first one was opened in 1990. We've 20 units in there. We actually take up 3 of them ourselves, between CE, our own offices, and the uniform boutique. They're small units, very light, small industrial, up to about 800 square feet, but mostly on the upstairs level of the enterprise centre, small 1 or 2 person offices. In 2009, as I say, we opened the other enterprise centre, which offers a kind of a step up, and it has worked very well with some of our sitting tenants in this centre that would have started in the community enterprise centre in small offices, and then kind of expanded and graduated and worked their way up into the bigger enterprise centre. Eventually, they get released to the wild, and when they outgrow that centre. So there is a deficit of sort of small to medium-sized spaces in the town, and that's the gap that we fill. The revolving loan fund is just an initiative that we started with Westmeath Community Development maybe 15 years ago, with €15,000, and that money is loaned out in grants to back to work or back to enterprise grants, or not grants but loans to people looking to come off long-term unemployed and go into starting their own business or whatever. So we offer loans up to €3,000 on that. It's facilitated through the local credit union. And that 15,000 has been loaned out to the tune of over 90,000 at this stage. So when it's paid back in, it comes back into the pot. The idea at the beginning, we thought that it would eventually dry up, but at the moment, it's still going, and it's still going strong. So, and we offer advice and mentoring then through ourselves, and signposting to various supports and so on. So we look a lot, even with people who come in thinking that the Enterprise Centre is the Enterprise Board, which happens a lot, and they come in to us, and we're able to give them whatever direction and help they need. I have some pictures of the Community Enterprise Centre. So this is the original one. It's built on a piece of land that was loaned or leased to us by the parish. So it's on a piece of parish ground. The board of the Enterprise Centre, of the Action Group, includes a representative from the parish, from the council, from local business. We have a guy from the insurance industry, which is very helpful. We've a finance person, which is very helpful. We have LEO person, which is very helpful. So we have a very good balance of skills and so on the board. Within the Enterprise Centre, we have a local cafe. This is some of the sort of light industrial. This guy makes picture frames, some professional services. We've a dental mechanic if you want to get your teeth done. So yeah, that's the courtyard there, and like I said, we've the 20 units around, and it's a fabulous little community we have going there, and everybody knows everybody else, and a lot of people learn from each other, and it's not unusual to get two boys discussing problems or issues or strategic issues or so on in the cafe. So it's a lovely little ecosystem for enterprises. Then, as I mentioned, the kind of step up is the Enterprise Technology and Innovation Centre. So this is that building here. It's on the industrial estate outside, pretty much on the ring road outside of town. So it's got great connections, transport connections and so on. Both centres are facilitated with a high-speed broadband, fibre and so on. So that's our front desk there. This is an example of one of the office spaces. This is the smallest office space we have. It's about 500 square feet. Typical office, and we have a great range of businesses and enterprises, private and Westmeath Community Development are sitting tenants there as well, so they contribute a lot to the centre. We have a bakery, we have a coffee, barista training school. Bell Lane have started a barista training school, and Bell Lane are coffee roasters. Probably one of the interesting stories that they started. One guy actually started this in the other Enterprise Centre in one of the small spaces with an ordinary domestic coffee roasting machine, and he has grown this now. They employ in excess of 30 people. They're outgrowing this space. They've taken up another space purely for warehousing and storage. It's a great success story, Bell Lane Coffee. This is the Pilates studio, a bakery again. I always like to finish with cake. The Uniform Boutique then. So the Uniform Boutique started in 1987. So really one of the original projects of the Action Group as well. The Uniform Boutique started, for anyone who remembers pre-FOSS, was an ANCO course where the skirts and jumpers and uniforms were actually made by people working on the schemes in the Enterprise Centre. But now that's not the case, and they're all kind of purchased. So we're mainly a retail outlet, but we always buy Irish where possible. All our knitwear is Irish. All our sweat tops and bottoms are all Irish made. All our trousers are Irish made. So during lockdown, again, bit of reconfiguration and rethinking was required during lockdown. So we started the uniformboutique.ie with a commercial website grant from the LEO. And we serve 22 primary schools and 6 secondary schools. So it's quite a big operation for us. With very much a seasonal impact in that in the month of August we were all hands on deck, and for the rest of the year the 3 C staff are able to keep it running between stock taking, deciding on reordering and so on, which happens in January, and then taking in stock and stuff like that. But yeah, particularly the last 2 weeks in August is pretty hectic. There's a list of the schools. I'm sure it's not too interesting to anybody, but this is just a few pictures of the shop itself. So that, like I said, this is in one of our own units in the Enterprise Centre. These were taken recently, so the shelves are fairly empty compared to what they would be in August. So yeah, that's the boutique. So then we have the jobs activation. I presume everybody here is familiar with JI and CE schemes. So this just to give you an idea of the numbers. In total, we've 33 people on CE scheme, and we've 8 remaining people on the JI scheme, which over the next 10 years or so, those numbers will fall off as people retire and so on. We've got, again, the schools, the uniform boutique give us great connection with the community, and so does the job activation. So you can see the list of organisations, community and social organisations we partner with. So these are all sub-sponsor groups. And our C scheme has consistently up close to 90% progression. So it's very high. Progression into further full-term education or into employment. So we're very proud of that. The Monaghan Recycle Resource Centre is a separate company, but again, it was originally started as part of the Action Group, and then when the CSP scheme came in, it was kind of I think it was kind of required that time, more or less, to separate with a different board of management and so on and so forth. So we still. I sit as a director in that company. I think John does as well. So we still sit there and we still steer it and help out in every way possible. So it's operating since 1980s, when the guys were collecting glass, bringing it back to the UA yard, smashing it up with sledgehammers in barrels, spreading it out on the ground and sorting out the different coloured glass, and then bringing it up to Quinn glass for Manna to pass it on and to get some money for it. So that has changed a lot over the years. An awful lot of those processes are very industrialised now, but we still have one manager, 6 FTEs, and we provide just more than bottles now. We do all the pub collections around the town. We do the bottle banks, we do cardboard pallets, we have a confidential shredding service, and basically anything else that if people have clear outs they want to do, or if they want bulky waste removed, we'll do those sort of things as well. So it's getting tighter, the recycling centre. It's hard to keep justifying the numbers, and we probably will reduce numbers in the very near future, but it's still viable, but because an awful lot of that manual work has been processed out of it, it's hard to keep the 6 guys. But a lot of the guys that a couple of the guys today are almost retirement age anyway, so the idea is that we won't necessarily replace those positions. And then Erasmus Plus. So we've already heard about the programme. We're active in Europe purely through Erasmus Plus. We haven't moved into any of the other programmes. We are definitely looking at Interreg and Horizon Plus, or Horizon, as opportunities or possibilities, but at the moment we're very focused on Erasmus Plus. And as I mentioned, it became even more important during the the COVID crisis to us. So at the moment we've got 8 projects on the go. One we managed ourselves, and during that period we accepted a lot of invitations that we were getting to partner on projects, and that's how we managed to get the numbers up. So we started in 2015. A little bit counter to what Emma was saying, we wrote our first project. We built our first partnership. The way we did that is we started a LinkedIn group, and we looked for organisations in similar sort of space as ourselves. We closed it when we had 100 people, or 100 different organisations from around Europe joined the group. And we filtered through those, and we wrote the first project with 5 European partners. And we're still working with most of those 5. So we were lucky in that we chose well, I guess. So yeah, that was 2015. So at this stage, I think I have a video here if it'll play. We did this video for the wheel, I think, a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how to play it. Do we have sound?
I don't think so.
Yeah, if we don't, it doesn't matter. But this was a video we done. But since 2015, the reason I was showing the video is because the video was only done 2 years ago, and I think when we did the video, we had partnered with 20 organisations, and we were involved in maybe 6 or 7 European projects. So you can see that's doubled in the last couple of years because of the needs. So yeah, 49 organisations throughout Europe, as I say, from universities to county councils or government agencies to private consultancies to schools to not-for-profits like ourselves. So we've got a huge network in Europe. Practically every country in Europe, 23. Is there 4 more that we've missed or something? 27. And 13 Erasmus Plus projects in total, 8 of which are still running, 4 of which will be finished before the end of this year. In that case, that we'll kind of revert back to normal sort of levels. And this is an example of some of the projects that we've been involved in. So the very first one we did was crucial crowdfunding. So it was specifically focused on SMEs and small businesses, how they might access crowdfunding as a way of generating money and startup or stake money and so on. So I think I've got a few minutes to talk about a few of these projects. I was particularly interested in talking about the Social Finance Lab that I mentioned. So the Social Finance Lab is a project specifically, it was led by a German partner, in fact. We had a German, Lithuanian sort of a social incubator organisation. We had a university in Latvia. We had a private organisation, consultancy to works with startup business, social businesses. From Germany, ourselves, Southwest College in Northern Ireland, and they were the partners in that project. And basically what we did was we built a resource, a sort of a collaborative learning resource for social enterprises on sources of funds or funding mechanisms or sources of finance, which includes European projects, it includes crowdfunding, it includes government contracts and things like that. So it's a huge resource, and I just encourage you all to take a look at it.
No, you might need to wrap up.
You might need to wrap up. The other project I just want to mention is the Evnia project, which was Be Well project. Evnia is a Greek word. We had a Greek partner on it, which means as a good state of mental health or something along those lines. I don't think there's a direct translation. But the Evnia project is specifically focused at mental health in the workplace. And we provide all the tools, learning, handbooks, training videos, to help people implement a system for mental health in the mental health management in the workplace and mental health first aid training. The reason this is a project we led ourselves, and It's something that we feel very passionately about. We feel that a lot of workplaces have their mental health or their health and safety strategies in place, but they kind of gloss over or avoid the issue of mental health in the workplace. And this project is looking to sort of address that anomaly. That's pretty much all I'll say. So thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Just before we start our Q&A panel, if that's all right, I'll just say how exciting it is to hear about. When we talk about social enterprises, we often have a notion of very small to medium organizations with emphasis on small, if not micro, but with kind of like shockingly great ideas. But we don't have to talk about the sustainability of a social enterprise model. Like we've heard about, Clock Jordan established 2010. That's 12 years now. Leitrim Design House 2000. That's 22 years. Meag 31 years. 1986. Like these are organizations that are sustainable. These models do work. They are very effective, and they're supported not only by volunteers and staff members and government funding, which is quite necessary, but more importantly, a strong, committed group of community members who who want to see a difference. And it's lovely that all of you talked about the social capital that your organizations are generating for your local communities, as well as the biodiversity as well. So that's lovely. Thank you again to all our speakers, as well as to Emma from the Wheel. What we're going to do is we're going to take about a kind of 15-minute Q&A and take questions if people have them. If you do have a question, we'd love to hear who you are as well. So if you don't mind introducing yourself and what organization you're from, I know that will help all of us. After our 15 minutes are over, we're going to have a light lunch and some networking opportunities for all of us. So I hope you'll hang on, if at very least for the food, but also to kind of shake hands, introduce yourselves, tell us about your work. And if you do have questions, please ask all of us as well. So let's get started. Does anybody here have any questions that they'd love to ask, or things that they'd love to be able to learn a little bit more about from our guest speakers? And if you do have questions for the local development company as well, now's a great opportunity for that.
I have a question.
Please,
My name is Catherine Jones, and I manage a social enterprise in Monaghan. We produce Meals and Wheels and hot school lunches and all that, over 1,300 a week. But my question is to Michael.
Mm-hmm.
The ownership of your buildings, what's that structure like? I'm just curious about that.
So the two enterprise centres, we would have set up separate companies, subsidiary companies. Kind of. I think the main reason for that is when the second enterprise centre, the Enterprise Technology and Innovation Centre, was built, we had very little debt on the original. So to kind of separate the two, the Enterprise Technology and Innovation Centre was set up as a separate company, and it has a mortgage that we're servicing. The other centre is completely owned by us, but it's built on parish ground. So in the event that actually ever falls or close up or whatever, that would revert back to the parish. Similarly, the other centre, the Enterprise Technology and Innovation Centre, is on council ground, with the freehold ground, but it's essentially it's county council land. So.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. So one of the questions that I was wondering, and I think it's very interesting that I think each of you talked about, is that all your organizations kind of provide a great deal of training. I wondered if you might highlight what is the training that you maybe provided to your staff, and whether that was, how that helped build capacity on your existing staff team around developing your organization. Has there been different training, programs that you guys have accessed, or it could be for anyone, but Emma, if you could speak to that.
We would also avail training for staff through the Leo, so for upskilling for staff, and just and programs like the Green for Micro as well, that kind of learning new initiatives, and photography training, and as things move more online, so that more social media and different technologies as well. It's mostly through the enterprise office and the Leitrim Development Company as well for training.
Thank you, Emma. Oliver, for your team, do you guys?
Yeah, we did some training with the wheel actually on strategic planning and development towards 2030. Separate to that, then it's some was funded through Community Finance Ireland, and then the ESC funding is obviously training. It's the people who come do. It's not exclusively work; it's work and learning, and some of them then stay on and work on other farms in Ireland as well. So they don't all just go home immediately. So from within the EU, they do stay on.
Wow.
Previously, you used to be able to bring people in from Turkey and from Russia. I don't, obviously, probably not Russia now, but we have had people from that far afield, so it's hard for them to stay on beyond the year. But generally speaking, the Europeans can stay on, and they do learn. Like we have a food hub now that the farm manages that has the market I mentioned. So if we were to develop that further, then we would get some training in business development for that. But that's kind of like processing and retail, whereas with the community farm model, we don't have to do retail because it's internal, because it's membership based. At the same time, you have to be aware of what the membership wants. But yeah, they would be our main training areas.
Thank you. Michael, do you guys have you done any training to build the capacity of your core team, your core staff?
We don't deliver in-house training ourselves, we're not trainers, but we obviously provide training for the CE people, the JI people, the CSP people. In fact, CSP scheme is not necessarily a development and progression project, but we do reinvest surpluses into retraining, and we've moved on a lot of people over the recent 5 to 8 years into full-time employment and stuff like that. With Erasmus, if we're being completely honest, we originally got into it for work and for finance, but now we're looking at it and we're starting to think a lot more strategically about it, and we want to use it to develop training programs that we can actually deliver in-house to the CE people and so on, so that closes the circle somewhat for us.
Thank you.
Question for Emma. Julie Clark, Monaghan Integrated Development. You're in a council-owned building. Do you pay rent?
So we offer services for the dock. So there's a box office there, so we provide service as front of house and customer service for that.
So you don't pay an actual rent to?
With the
provide services.
Yeah, it's a service. It's in lieu of the service.
Okay. Wow.
And the tender that you deliver for the local enterprise office, can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that came about?
So that would be kind of support. So it would be the training to cover the costs around marketing, promotion. So we would complete reports every 6 months for that. So it's what we've done in the last 6 months, projects that we've run, and then we would apply for that money.
Retrospectively, is it?
No, for the next
6
months, yeah.
Is that something that's been in place for long, or?
It would be a number of years, yeah.
Mm.
Very good. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, can I ask Michael, just Joe from the local enterprise office? Are there gaps, Michael, that obviously the whole level of our training already in place through ETBs, local development, all of these leaders? Are there gaps that you identified that Erasmus Plus can fund or needed training that say, well, listen, we can't get funding for that anywhere, we go to Erasmus Plus to get it, and I'm just taking up there's a whole range of training available, particularly under the ETB recently. There's a huge level of interventions.
Yeah, it's true, and as we said, we don't deliver training in-house ourselves, typically, but when the projects that we got involved in, and particularly the ones that we've led ourselves, are very sort of niche, if you like. So we developed a qualification, actually an accredited qualification on running microbreweries. The reason being that we noticed that a lot of people who were starting up craft breweries and so on were coming from all walks of life, but they weren't necessarily coming from business management point of view. They were coming more from making good beer point of view. So we developed a a diploma in brewing entrepreneurship, and it actually covered a lot of the fundamentals of brewing, but then it covered all the sort of very focused business training that would be around that industry, and some of the due diligence or regulatory stuff as well. So that's the kind of thing that we would look at through Erasmus Plus rather than general business training, I guess. It's always very niche and focused. We did one on pop-up shop. Pop-up shop help, or actually Emma might be interested in having a look at that. It's called the Push Project, and it was focused at makers who know how to make but don't necessarily know how to commercialise their product. So we did a training project on that as well. It's called Pop-up Shop Helper.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, here at the back.
It's an issue with the partnership. In terms of what you were describing there, Emma, again, great to see that type of funding here. I think today's just been terrific in terms of the policy and everything else that's being provided. The Peace Plus, as we're now calling it, we're kind of looking at March next year, and I'm wondering what type of supports are being offered by the Wheel in relation to that, if any, or is that a separate?
No, absolutely. You can avail of any Access Europe supports for any type of European funding. It doesn't matter which programme you're applying for. Now, the SEUPB are your kind of contact point, and we always kind of defer to the contact point. They're the experts on their individual programmes. They know all the kind of legal and financial aspects of it. We're a wraparound kind of general EU funding and then signposting service to the, you know, if you come to me with an idea and I'll tell you which programme it belongs in, and then I defer to them as the kind of experts on their programme. But certainly, like with notice, I always like to try and not oversell myself, but certainly we can have kind of one-to-one meetings to help you shape your project. With enough notice, we can do application review. If it's a major project, like 1 million plus, we haven't offered this yet, but we're kind of piloting the idea of being able to kind of fund a little bit of consultancy. So a little bit of a consultant to work with, even just do a couple of reviews or a couple of workshops or something. So that's kind of an experimental idea that we haven't officially offered yet, but you know, it's a potential resource that's available. And then we can also do partnership building. Now we have our partnership database, because obviously in most peace projects you do have to have that cross-border collaboration. Now if you have the connections and you know people, great, but if you are looking for specific partners, our partner database is there. It is just because of the nature of the Wheels network, it's mostly focused in the Republic, but I think we do have a few that are over the border, but certainly we would be looking at working with the SEUPB to use our platform to add more organisations that are specifically interested in peace, and then we can manually matchmake as well. If you're looking for a partner and you can't find one, like I can't make any guarantees, but we have really good contacts with NICFA and the Wheel equivalent in Northern Ireland, and between our memberships and between all the kind of hive mind of the Wheel and otherwise, we can usually help connect partnerships. So yeah, and that's available for any programme that you might be applying for.
Just to follow up that, I noticed that during the summer, the series hosted by ATU, Letterkenny, there's a very similar initiative within the Arctic region. You're looking at Norway, Finland and Russia as well. Outside of the Peace Plus, is there an opportunity to link that through Interreg as a separate entity?
So would this be to collaborate with those partners? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so through Interreg, so the Northern Periphery Arctic region that we're part of, there's like peace in itself is kind of like a mini Interreg program, so it operates actually quite similarly. Now the different thing is that peace is kind of heavily co-financed by the British and Irish governments, whereas Interreg, like there is a kind of, it's an undertaking in that the co-financing can be quite low compared to other programs. Like a typical co-financing for most EU programs is 80%, whereas for the Interregs you can be looking at as low as 60%. So it's something to consider. Now that's not to say you can get like government funding to kind of provide some match funding and stuff like that, but it's something to consider. But yes, there's definitely opportunities to do kind of peace-style projects, but in those other regions. Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
John McGrath, Monaghan Employment Action Group. Just something that we did before Michael came in from the social enterprise point of view that might be relevant. Early on in the 80s, there was a local swimming school who did an awful lot of training, particularly for one-parent families, to upskill them. A lot of them were young women, who had left school early or whatever, but they did a lot of these training to upskill them. They ended up with a group of about 100 people, and that upskilled them. But there were still one-parent families depending on social welfare or whatever. So we came in and we actually made a business out of it, and we employed 100 women, and we started home care services in Mullingar. And after running it for a while, the management went back to the women's group, and it still runs. But the interesting thing out of it, which was something I was involved later, there was a group came together, again it was a European project with a number of major companies, one of them being Iontas. And we described how a town of 10,000 people had come up with this home care services package. And at the time, Iontas had done away with the service for bringing people in wheelchairs. Had done away with that. It's now done by a private company in the airport. But they actually set up the Green Jackets, if anybody remembers it, because they looked at the model of home care services and they said they had a community at Dublin Airport about double that, nearly 20,000 people, and they would be able to provide the services there. So that ran for a number of years before it went out to private, but it's something which I think as a social enterprise could really be replicated elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know I'm Irish Water. I just wanted to ask Oliver just about, did you crowdfund the start up the community farm enterprise, or just among yourselves, was it, or?
Yeah, it was internal, completely internal, yeah.
Oh, completely internal.
Yeah. I mean, other, like for example, there was a local co-op cafe in Mid-Tip, the Lochmore Cafe, and they just called a meeting in the local GA club and got people to put money in as their crowdfunding. So there's different ways to do it. Like, you can crowdfund from the wider community. Like we crowdfunded from the Eco-Village community. Now the farm is half Eco-Village and half people from the region in terms of the membership base. So, but we did then, do it that way, yeah.
Thank you. Probably have time for maybe 2 more questions. That's all right, yes.
Francis McCarran, one of the integrated development. Oliver, I'm just wondering, the Clough Jordan's on the go a number of years now, the Eco-Village, and the community farms on the go a number of years. Are you aware that it's being replicated elsewhere in the country, or is it still in the early days? And I'm just wondering, with all this focus on climate and environment and everything, do you think there's a lot more scope for that?
I mean, elements of it are for sure. Lots of the things we did with our building standards and so on are kind of the standards now. And also we've said, like, people from the Eco-Village have set up things, like for example, the Community Power Company based in Mid-Tip, which is kind of comes from leader-funded, community-owned wind farm in Templederry. That was set up by one of the founders of the Eco-Village. And we are doing a lot of work, individuals from the Eco-Village are doing a lot of work to help with, retrofitting your grants and the like in the North Tip region as well. So a lot of the elements get replicated. The comprehensive Eco-Village concept is a hard thing to replicate. So it's more that the energy model, the farming model, even the enterprise centre model itself. Like there's a fab lab in the enterprise centre, like a fabrication lab, so it uses 3D printers and laser printing and so on. You start to see those things get replicated in different places. It takes a lot to do something on the scale of an Eco-Village. But then even if you look at Coulon, for example, some of the housing standards and the infrastructural elements of renewables and so on that they're putting in as standard now in some of their developments are obviously very similar as well to what we have. So you see it replicating in those areas, but you don't see the comprehensive thing replicating. And it's probably easier to replicate the elements. It's easier to do the farm model and do it in the simpler way I was describing, and it's easier to make it easy for people to retrofit and to put solar panels on the roofs and so on. All these elements are easier, and they're better funded now as well. So we did all of it without funding, really, so.
Thank you.
Cheers.
One last question.
Yeah, just building on that in regards social enterprise and the whole green environment and the opportunity in that. I asked Michael regards the recycling. Why is that under danger now as regards being diminished? I don't know, I would have thought there's greater opportunity now, or is the, the private sector diminishing it or
well, glass has been and still is probably the main traded income generator of that, between the subsidies and between the price we get for selling on glass. But the value of the glass has dropped an awful lot for us, because we're not, even if we did all the manual sorting and crushing that we used to do, we still wouldn't get a better price for it, because regulation is such that it still has to go through that process, and it still has to be separated automatically or automated through those automated processes. So it goes down to Glasgow and Kildare. And there's nothing we can do about that. We don't have
so kind of private sector's case.
Yeah, we don't have the resource to put into sort of infrastructure to do those sort of things. So, there is other options on the horizon, possibly looking into plastics and things like that, but the price of metals and the price of cardboard and all of that fluctuates fairly wildly, and at the moment they're not generating a whole lot of income for us either. In fact, for a long time there, instead of getting something like, I forget, €9 a tonne for cardboards, for a long time there we were actually having to pay to get rid of it, so we were actually collecting it for nothing. So yeah, these are the challenges, I guess. So it's constantly evolving industry anyway, but I think we're at the lower end of the technology spectrum when it comes to it. It's hard to compete.
Thank you for the questions from everyone, and we're gonna leave it there, but we're gonna continue on in the next step. We're gonna have Francis come up in just a moment to say thanks. But I just want to get a round of applause for our panel of guest speakers.
And so to conclude, I'd just like again to echo Philip's thanks to our speakers, to Emma and Michael and Oliver, and to Philip himself. I'd also like to thank again Julie Clark, Mary McCabe and Ola Brady, who basically helped us get the resource together that has us all together here today. And I have to give an honourable mention to my colleague Mike Stuffy, who manned the table out front this morning. Social enterprise, you all know the power that social enterprise has, and we're in a social enterprise. And when you go downstairs to the cafe and you're having your cup of tea or your bit to eat, just to realise that the huge potential that there is in this sector. And the resource that we have here today, it's a tool to be used to build on the possibilities of having more social enterprise. If you use it and you love it, please spread the word. Tell everyone you know about it. If you absolutely hate it, tell all your enemies about it. Just get the word out in it one way or other. It would be very remiss of me to end today without saying just personally a real thank you to Julie Clark, who's been my colleague for so many years. And wish you every success, Julie, in your new role in the years ahead. And then you've probably had enough of everyone talking, so we're going to stand and go downstairs. But just as you do, be careful if there's glasses or cups under your feet. Just thank you one and all again.
Thank you.